We're living in the shortcut era. If you think about, Serena Williams, I think she did a GLP-1 commercial for Ozempic. No, it wasn't Ozempic. It's a different company she did, even for Super Bowl. You see her when she played tennis, you see what she looks like today. The average woman looks at that and says, if she couldn't do it naturally, why should I try to do it naturally with exercise? Oprah Winfrey, don't know if you saw this clip on The View. Rob, can you pull this clip up on The View of what she said? She's on The View, and she says, it took me this many years to realize that being fat is not my fault. It's my genetics or it's my DNA. And by the way, you may agree with her. Go ahead and play this clip, Rob. Go for it.
All these years, I thought I was overeating. I was standing there with all the food noise, what I ate, what I should eat, how many calories was that, how long is it going to take. I thought that that was because of me and my fault. Yeah. Now I understand that if you carry the obesity gene, if that is what you have, that is what makes you overeat. You don't overeat and become obese. Right. Obesity causes you to overeat. Right. Obesity causes you to have all of that food noise. And what the GLP-1s have done for me, and I know a number of other people, is to quiet that noise.
Yeah.
Do you agree with her?
No.
Okay, tell me why.
Okay, so this is going to be a very long-winded answer.
Please.
Because there's a lot of components there to unpack. I mean,
because the average person watches this. She's 72 years old, looking like that. They're going to say, why wouldn't I do it?
Right. So there's a lot of things to unpack here. Okay. First of all, there's no just obesity gene. Okay. There are, genes that are associated with predisposing someone to gaining fat easier and affecting satiation and things like that easier, right? But it's not like there's just one obesity gene that makes you obese. With that said, okay, what she's talking about here with it wasn't my fault, you have to realize that we have studies now where you can take, there's healthy men, okay? They're not overweight, they're not obese, and you can put them on a high caloric, ultra processed food diet for 5 days. And what I mean by that is they're consuming 1,200 to 1,500 more calories per day, predominantly from processed foods, the cereal you were talking about. Right? This is the food that's high in added sugar and saturated fat. And what happens is it causes their brain to become insulin resistant. Yes, you can cause your brain also to become insulin resistant. We usually think about, our cells in our body becoming insulin resistant. What happens when your brain becomes insulin resistant is the following. For one, insulin in the brain plays a very important role. And that role is to basically tell the body how to store fat and how to use energy and whether or not you're satiated after eating a meal. And what happens is when you're insulin resistant in the brain, it all gets messed up. And so your body starts to store fat, not as what's called subcutaneous fat, that kind of fat that you can pinch and see. It's visceral fat. This is the belly fat. This is the fat that's deeply surrounding your organs. This is the very dangerous type of fat because this fat is metabolically active. It is generating inflammation. It is constantly being metabolized in what's called free fatty acids, which then cause insulin resistance, right? And so what happens is that these individuals, these healthy young men, all of a sudden, even though they didn't really gain much weight on the scale, they gained visceral fat and they were no longer, satiated. So what happens is when you become insulin resistant, both in the brain and in the body, so visceral fat gaining, they were gaining fat around their liver. I mean, they were gaining fat, this visceral fat that is really, really dangerous. That visceral fat, what happens is every time you eat, a meal that's got a lot of glucose, for example, a refined, ultra-processed meal, your body makes insulin, but you're insulin resistant, so you're not able to respond to that insulin. And so what happens is your body overcompensates and produces, your pancreas causes more insulin to be released as an overcompensation to help your body bring that glucose into your muscle or into your adipose tissue. And then what happens is your blood sugar crashes. And so that tells the brain, oh, I'm in a crisis. I need energy right now. And you crave these high energy, high calorically dense foods. And it's this vicious cycle where you start to overeat more. You can totally reset that system by decreasing your calorie intake. And there's a variety of ways of doing that. And also by including high intensity interval training any type of aerobic exercise is good. It causes you to lose visceral fat. Even if you don't shed the pounds on the scale, the losing of the visceral fat is the key, because that's the whole cycle of basically disrupting your satiety hormones, how you feel, satiated after you eat, or like hungry, all of a sudden you're hungry even though you just ate a meal, right? That's all part of insulin resistance and visceral fat. And so if you reduce your calorie intake, and there's ways you can do that, counting calories is one. A lot of people like intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is something that I do. And it's really, I'm middle-aged, right? I told you I'm 47. And I've realized that everything that I do, even though I've been doing it for years, all of a sudden, as your hormones start to change, you do start to kind of get more visceral fat. And that's something that's known to happen with women as they're aging, right? I had to cut calories. That was the main thing I had to do, even though I was doing high intensity exercise, all that stuff. Calorie cutting is the number one way that you can actually lose visceral fat and ultimately lose weight. And essentially the GLP-1, receptor agonists, these drugs that are Ozempic and all the other next generation ones, are essentially doing that. You're causing yourself to be satiated, right? So it's essentially doing what intermittent fasting is doing, but it's also doing other things. It's slowing gastric emptying, right? So you're basically, the food's sitting around in your intestines longer, which
it sits there longer.
Yes.
It doesn't accelerate the immune system.
So the GLP-1 receptor agonists like Ozempic, so, semaglutide, they're slowing what's called gastric emptying. So the food it stays in your intestines longer, which is part of why you're satiated. There's a lot of course, side effects, but intermittent fasting, basically you can also lose weight and also reset your hormones. You can lose visceral fat. You can, when I say reset your hormones, I mean so that you're satiated after a meal, so that you're not feeling hungry immediately after you ate, because the visceral fat does start to lose. It's the first thing that's lost. In fact, many studies have shown that if you calorie restrict, that's the first thing that goes, and it really does help reset the system. When people first start an intermittent fasting protocol, if they've never done it, it can be challenging because they're not what's called metabolically flexible. So that means that essentially your body is really capable of using fatty acids as energy to make ketone bodies. This is something that's a very sort of clean source of energy that's used. It's great for the brain. But if you've never really fasted, if you're constantly grazing your eating and you don't exercise, because exercise also can make you metabolically flexible, then your body isn't used to it, and it's a little bit of an activation energy. You have to kind of push past it. It's a little bit more challenging, but your body adapts. And so after a couple of weeks, guess what? Like if you're intermittent fasting, and there's a lot of ways to do that. So, let's say you skip a meal, then you're not like, I haven't eaten anything today, yet. And I usually eat my first meal around noon.
Do you do this every day, 7 days a week? Even Sundays?
I do mostly every day a week,
Okay.
yeah. But I'm not hungry until noon because your body adapts. And ketone bodies, which are what are made when you're basically metabolizing fatty acids for fuel rather than glucose, is those ketones like beta hydroxybutyrate. They're satiating. Like you're satiated. And so it takes a person, we can store glucose in our liver as glycogen. And you have to be fasted for anywhere between 12 to 36 hours for your liver to deplete all their glycogen levels. And that all depends on
12 to 36.
It all depends on your diet. If you're eating a lot of carbs, refined carbs, it's going to be more like 36 hours. If you're eating more of a whole foods type of diets, like protein, lean meats, poultry, fish, vegetables, that's glycogen is going to be depleted after like 12 hours. And then, anything about beyond that, you're going to be in what's called like ketosis. So for me, I usually stop eating dinner 6 p.m. Usually, sometimes, social obligations push that a little bit later. And I don't eat my first meal until around noon. So for me, I'm fasting for about, 18 hours, right? Now there's the 16-8 where you basically stop eating your meal around 8 p.m. and don't eat your first meal until noon.
2.
Or no, I mean, if you 8 p.m. or you could start, if you stop at 6 p.m. then 2. It depends, right? So like
But you do
whatever
it
works
18
for
hours.
you. Some people they have to wake up in the morning and eat breakfast. Like I said, there is an adjustment period. For me, it works really well. Other people like to do, they're gonna skip lunch or something, and that's a way of reducing your calorie intake. And at the end of the day, calorie intake is what causes weight loss. And that is something, again, that you're not going to lose the weight as rapid as you would on a GLP-1 because it really causes you to not get.
So why would she, 72 years old, access to all the money in the world, one of the most famous people in the world, she can call any doctor she wants. Who convinced her that she was right about the statement that she made? She knows millions of people are going to see it.
Yeah, well, I think for one, it's easier to take a pill to help you lose weight. And that's something that people like her know. How am I going to affect the masses? Because not everyone's going to do intermittent fasting, right? Exercise, you can't exercise your way out of obesity. You have to change your diet because imagine do you know how hard it is to burn, 1,500 calories by exercise, right? It's incredibly hard. You exercise because of the anti-aging effects. Like there's a lot of different things happening with exercise that are good for the heart and the brain. But to lose weight, you have to stop eating. You have to reduce your calorie intake. And that does require effort. And so I think that it's easier to say, oh, it's not my fault, there's these genes. And yeah, genes can make it where it is harder for a person who has certain variations in the gene to lose as much weight as someone who doesn't. But that doesn't make it impossible. It just means you have to put in more effort. And, doing intermittent fasting or counting calories does require effort on your part, whereas taking a pill does not. The pill does it for you, right? And so, it all comes down to risk versus benefit, right? Like if you have someone who's obesity itself accelerates the aging process. It increases the risk of 13 different types of cancer, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease. If you are obese, you are on a bad trajectory. And anything that's going to help you lose that weight is going to be beneficial for both.
Including GLP-1?
Including GLP-1
really?
receptor agonists, yes.
So you're more so if I'm 320 pounds, 5'8", okay, and if I exercise and keep a decent diet, it'll take me a while to get to 180 where I need to be, let's just say, right? But if I get on GLP-1 and if I can get there faster in 3 months and 6 months, whatever the timeline may be, you're supportive for me doing GLP-1 to lose that weight?
No, absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think it's better if you can do it yourself. I think that you're going to avoid any adverse side effects. When you lose a lot of weight really rapidly, you can increase the risk of gallbladder stones. GLP-1 receptor agonists are associated with, theoretically, an increased risk of thyroid cancer. All that's preclinical data, though, so there's not really human studies showing that. But it's still a thing to think about, right? If it's causing it in animals, like we just may not have that longitudinal data yet. I don't know. There are pancreatitis risk. I mean, there are risks associated with it, right? With losing weight,
too much weight loss too fast.
Now, if you're someone that's willing to calorie restrict either through intermittent fasting, which is a great tool, or by counting calories, and at that point, people on average can lose, if you're doing a really strict calorie restriction, like 800, or fewer calories per day, people lose on average between like 2 to 5 pounds per week. So, you really could get
800.
Yeah.
2 to 5 a week. So if I'm 320, 800. If I'm 320, what do you think my intake is?
It depends. Probably. You have to cut out a lot of calories, right? So that's why people turn to these GLP-1.
That's it. Yeah. So the control, the discipline to control and say I'm not going to eat it, versus just give it to me. I'm going to take the shot and I'm going to go the faster way, instead of doing it the old-fashioned exercise way, the good diet way. Yeah, I don't know. When we set out to create a shoe that blends comfort, function, and luxury, we had the choice to make it fast. We had the choice to make it cheap. We chose neither. Instead, we chose Tuscany, Italy. We chose true Italian craftsmanship, each pair touched by 50 skilled hands. We chose patience, spending 2 years perfecting every detail, and we chose the finest quality at every step. Introducing the Future Looks Bright collection. Not rushed, not disposable, not ordinary. Rather, intentional, luxurious, timeless. If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.